Welcome to another episode with your chapter crush sweetheart. This is Everblue Presents When You're Enough, a chapter crush sweetheart series. Bronwyn, Chapter 6. Grief is love turned into an eternal missing. Rosamund Lupton. I begin laughing as my fingers trip over the keys in their practiced fashion. Oh, Julia, how I miss you. Transitioning into Ravel's Jeu d'eau, I remember the consternation of my actual French teacher when I would speak in a way that he considered old-fashioned. Yet, as I spent 2 days a week learning to converse like a human with Julia, I aced every test in school. By the time I finished my 2 years of French in school and passed the proficiency exam, I thought of myself as an expert. Boy, did Julia prove me wrong. As the years rolled on, schools changed. Bryony and I grew separately, choosing different interests as she fell in love with culinary arts, and I began to excel at my high school accounting classes. Yet my Tuesdays and Thursdays remained the same, with one minor difference. I had taken a part-time job 3 days a week at the library that allowed me to pay for my own music lessons. My parents were thrilled by my independence, and I felt good knowing that I could personally do something for Julia. After all, I had long outgrown gifting her macaroni necklaces and handmade beaded bracelets. It was at the end of my junior year that Julia had her first stroke. I was beside myself when I showed up for my regular Tuesday lesson, and Frank told me Julia had collapsed the day before. I'd rushed to the hospital and was only granted admittance when I said she was my grandmother, because that's what she had become in all those years of shared conversation and music. My parents had a falling out with their own families when they decided to marry one another, so Bryony and I weren't close to them. Yet Julia was more than someone who filled in for missing grandparents. She was my friend, and I loved her as powerfully as my own parents. When I saw her frail appearance, her pallor as white as the bedsheets she was laying on, I took one look at the tubes running from her arms to countless beeping monitors and burst into tears. Though she was surprised to see me, she gently cooed over me as I wailed in French that she should have called me. How could she have been in the hospital for 2 days and not think to let me know? It barely registered that she could only move one arm and one side of her face was sagging. Yet she calmly quieted me in her lyrical voice and softly said, "What? You should be happy. I had the good sense to wait until I reached the lobby before passing out." That started a fresh wave of tears, but she just chuckled in her teasing way. I made sure everything was set up for when she arrived home, and I was there when she was released from the hospital. Despite her protests to having a nurse, I helped set it up for the 3 days I worked at the library, and I called her every day. She liked to joke all of that harassment was how she healed so fast. Within a few weeks, she only walked with a slight shuffle on her left side, but everything else returned to normal function. I appeared to be the only one left deeply affected by the event, as I wondered what would happen to her if I ended up going to college out of state. Who would take care of her? She wasn't far from 90 at that point and would be well over that age by the time I graduated. What would happen to her? What if she fell in her apartment with no one to check on her? So after a lot of pros and cons checklists and conversations with myself, I came to a decision. I would stay in the city, and that way I'd be able to keep up with her. I accepted a scholarship to NYU to major in accounting, because my parents don't believe musical degrees can pay the bills. Although, still, I minored in music. Julia was annoyed with me when she figured out why I decided to stay in New York, but I wouldn't be deterred. So off I went to NYU the following fall. It was easy to do my assignments as I rode the bus up to her apartment after class or after spending the night before an early morning. It also gave me time to clean the areas of her apartment she struggled with. As time went on, the amount of areas she could no longer clean to her satisfaction kept growing, which frustrated her to no end. But I didn't care. I'd clean as Julia sat nearby chatting or playing an old record for us on her phonograph. Occasionally, she'd sit at the piano herself and gently ease a song out of it that only she knew. And as the music took her to another place in time, I'd sit in rapture, trying to commit the music to memory. By then, I wasn't having real lessons as much as playing for fun or for an assignment I had for class. She'd offer correction when she thought it was needed, but for the most part, we enjoyed our days together. We would eat whatever light meals I'd put together in the kitchen and giggle over whatever guy I'd find attractive and occasionally date. After several heartbreaks, she sat with me through tears only she got to see and helped put me back together, piece by piece. Don't shed these tears over people who didn't take anything from you, my sweet, she'd whisper as she stroked my hair. When you love, it will be when you can give your whole heart. Only then will you have lost something. These boys will never measure up to the man who is worthy of you. So be patient. Don't waste your tears on boys who have never known you. I'm still grateful for that advice. To my parents, I'm just the girl looking for love in all the wrong places. To Bryony, I'm someone who's read too many romance novels and puts too much stock in finding the type of love I know exists. Oh, she believes it exists now, but she was a pain growing up. Julia is the only one who didn't see my search for love as a lack in me or a symptom of a problem. As time went on, Julia's health struggles gave us several scares, and after a particularly bad stroke in the December of my senior year, I was left wondering if she would recover. She joked that not even her brain could keep her down, but as the next semester began, I saw the need to move in with her to help with more of the things the nurse couldn't or wouldn't do. Watching the decline in person was hard. To see someone you love go from bouncing around lighter on her feet than you could ever be on your best day, to having to help them put toothpaste on their toothbrush. I don't wish that pain on anyone. Still, I hoped that she'd eventually improve. Yet, 3 weeks before my graduation, she called me into her room. Julia had taken to having long naps at all times of the day, so it wasn't unusual to see her laying down in the middle of the day. But her green eyes weren't as bright as they usually were. Waving me over, she held out a thin, papery hand, which I immediately clasped as I sank down on the side of her bed. "What can I do for you, Mama?" I'd taken to occasionally using the term affectionately sometime after the first stroke, and it had stuck. By then, she only spoke French, as she was finding it difficult to find the words in English. She smiled then, the lipstick she still insisted on wearing bleeding into the wrinkled crevices of her lips. "I want you to know something, my sweet. You know, there are different kinds of love. Yes." The worry that crept into my heart was intense, but I airily smiled. "Do you think you've taught me nothing in all this time, Julia?" Her soft, tinkling laugh joined mine, and some of the sparkle returned to her eyes. "Well, hear me now. Sometimes, with love, there comes loss. It's the way of the world, my dear. What must happen afterward? We must be strong. We must continue on, because it is what is expected." Frowning, I sat up a little. "Are you trying to tell me something, Mama?" "What are your ears for if not for listening, my sweet?" She smiled, the sharpness of her words blunted by the hand she lifted to stroke my face. "You are stronger than you know. You can bear many things, but you must be ready to share them with the right person when he comes along." A tear slipped down my cheek. "Okay, but that's way in the future, and you're going to dance at my wedding, so we don't need to talk about this now." When she arched a slim white brow knowingly, I grimaced. She never let me get away with not being honest. "It hurts too much to think of you missing from me, Mama. I can't imagine it. No, I won't imagine it. You just focus on getting better." Julia patted my hand and shook her head. "You can't hide from things that are inevitable, or you'll miss all of the time it took you to get there. We know death will come for us one day in one way or another, yet can be grateful for the time we have and all of our memories, precious girl." Reaching up to wipe another tear from my cheek, she gently smiled. "All right, you will have plenty of time for tears. Now, tell me, do you remember where all of my important documents are?" Pulling out the handkerchief she gave me so many years before, I dabbed at my nose as I nodded. "Yes, Julia, in the little green suitcase at the bottom of the linen closet." "That's right. Remember, if something happens to me, you're to contact Mr. Drake right away. He will make all of the arrangements so You don't worry about anything. I closed my eyes against her watery smile, but I nodded in agreement. I'll do it, but I still don't want to talk about this. You're going to get better, and I'll take care of you. My internship at Gleisman, Platts, Mercer, and Princeton is nearly over, and they've already offered me a job. I'm going to take you to the Chateau Ile. We chatted until she fell asleep before I crept out of her room. She seemed to be in good spirits towards the end of our conversation, so I shook off the sense of foreboding and got back to work. On the day I graduated from NYU, she gave me a locket that Mr. Matisse had gifted her on their wedding day. And as she patted my hand, her eyes sparkled the way they did the first time I met her. "Open it, my dear," she urged. As I pushed the clasp to unlatch the oval antique gold locket, she whispered, "I hope to give it to my daughter one day." When I looked at her, stricken with grief by the thought, she smiled. "I guess my granddaughter will have to do." I managed to smile through my tears as I looked down at the black and white image of her and Mr. Matisse. Despite its obvious age, it looked as if someone just put it there yesterday. "Julia, I don't know what to say. Thank you, but wow, it's such a precious gift." I shook my head, words failing me. Patting my hand, she shook her head. "Your thank you is more than enough." Words she'd say when I would make her take money from my lessons. Eventually, I just used the money to buy her groceries or the occasional treat from the bakery. Recalling those moments, all I could do was lay down beside her and rest my head on her shoulder as she stroked my hair, as she'd done hundreds of times before. "I love you, Mama," I whispered, fighting back my tears. I felt her head nod against mine as she said, "Of course you do, Bronwyn. I'm awesome." When I chuckled through my tears, she laughed. "It's true, which is why I love you too." A week later, she was gone. Just gone, as if she was a figment of my imagination. The medical examiner said she died peacefully in her sleep, and with the little smile on her face, I had no choice but to believe him. The following 2 weeks were a whirlwind. If it weren't for the support of Mr. Drake, my parents, and Bryony, I don't know how I would have coped. As it was, it felt as if I drifted from one room to the next. Mr. Drake's office, the closet in Julia's room as I picked out a dress I know she loved, the funeral parlor, empty save for Mr. Drake, the doorman, a few tenants from her building, and my family. The burial site in the Bronx, where her casket was lowered into the prepaid plot beside her beloved Marty, where my eyes remained dry as I hadn't cried since the morning I found her. Then my room at Mom and Dad's house, because the idea of going back to Edgar Allan Poe Street to pack up Julia's things resulted in such an unbearable scream of pain tearing through my soul that I was rendered lifeless. Until I was called by my supervisor at GPMP and told to report to work or be terminated. So I shuffled to yet another room, full of people who had no idea as they tittered over their morning coffee and discussed what was for lunch, that life had come to a complete standstill. She was just here. Back and forth I went on autopilot for a whole week. My bedroom to my cubicle and back again. Different faces, coming and going, the levels of concern rising with the number of days since I'd last seen Julia, until I got a phone call from Mr. Drake. As a new associate analyst, I didn't have more time to take off from work, so Mr. Drake said he would make a late appointment for me for the following day. So it was, I found myself in another room. Mr. Drake's office on the Upper East Side was just a short bus ride away from Julia's apartment through Central Park, but a world away in every other respect. There's far less greenery on this side of the park, the buildings more stark and businesslike, perfect for a lawyer's office. Sitting in the dark, wood-paneled office with oil paintings splashed with oranges and red, I wished it felt more welcoming. That changed the moment Mr. Drake opened his mouth. I was fully prepared to offer whatever insight I could into the documents I brought in the little green suitcase. From what I understood, everything Julia inherited was being liquidated and given to a music foundation. So when Mr. Drake said that covered everything except for a nominal sum to help pay the maintenance fees on the apartment for a year, as well as the apartment itself, I thought it was strange. Then he said the words that changed my life. Julia had bequeathed that nominal sum and the apartment itself to me. The poor man had to repeat himself 3 times. I thought for sure it was a mistake. Julia had been ill the last 2 years, but she hadn't lost her mind. Mr. Drake was more than pleased to tell me it was a decision made clear in her last will, dated nearly 10 years before. That was the moment I was ready to flee his coffin-like office. Because the timing, it didn't make sense. That was well after Mr. Matisse had died. That was around the time I began learning French. And that's how Mr. Drake became the only person to see me cry over my mama's death. Oh, Julia. My heart is breaking all over again by the time I've cycled through several classical pieces on the piano. I'm just concluding Iruma's River Flows in You when I look up at the clock. 5:35 already? With a start, I dry the tears from my face as I wipe down the keys and close the fallboard over them. I'm due at Mom and Dad's in 25 minutes and I haven't even showered. I'll have to bite the bullet and get a rideshare there and back. Heaving a sigh, I throw open the door to the music room and come to a screeching halt. I likely wouldn't have noticed Michel sitting on the bench in the dim alcove if it weren't for the light that spills out of the music room, slashing across his face. As he turns his head away from the bright light, it's easy to believe I imagined the tears on his face. "Hey," I mutter, turning off the light and keeping my own red eyes averted as I skitter towards my bedroom. When I'm near my door, I hesitate, realizing he hasn't responded. Cracking my door open, something tells me it isn't right to leave like this. So clearing my throat, I call, "I'm heading out in a bit, but if we need anything, let me know before the stores close at 10. With that, I push my door open. If I throw on a pair of jeans and a light sweater, Bronwyn. Michel's deep voice startles me as I'm closing my door. I'm not going back out there, but I open the door to talk through the crack. "Yes?" Seconds tick by before he says, "I didn't think you'd speak to me again after what happened earlier." Did he think I would ignore him because of it? My nostrils flare as I recall the conversation, but in my emotionally exhausted state, the anger and indignation are just a dull memory. I can be angry and a decent person, can't I? There's rustling, and I imagine he stood up, but I don't hear any footsteps. "Yes, I suppose you can." His accent strikes a chord as it reminds me of Julia all over again. "Okay, well," I start to close the door when he sighs. "Thank you for extending that grace to me." A pause, then, "Will you forgive me for speaking so rashly earlier?" My brows shoot up. I'd normally just say sure and let it go. Not today. "Depends. Are you apologizing for speaking so rashly earlier?" I don't believe my ears when I hear him chuckle. "That would be the best place to start, no? I am sorry, Bronwyn, for insulting you and being a condescending pig. Will you forgive me?" The corner of my mouth ticks up, but I refrain from smiling. "Yes, I forgive you, Michel. But may I make a suggestion?" Michel pauses, and I wonder what's going through his mind. "Please," he softly agrees. "Just think of this as an extension of the office. We're like co-workers who share a cubicle with overlapping job assignments and responsibilities. That doesn't mean we have to be friends. We can be honest with each other, but let's keep it professional, okay?" "Yes, I can do that." Then more softly, "Thank you, Bronwyn. Enjoy your evening." I smirk. "Are you kidding? I'm about to get off work. Of course I'll enjoy it." And without another word, I softly close the door as I wonder if I'll be able to follow my own advice.